I think you're misreading the results out of Massachusetts. The president will not walk away from the American people, will not hand them over to the tender mercies of health insurance companies who take advantage.
A little mixed messaging coming out of the White House. Last week, President Obama said it's time for core principles of health care scaled down. His advisors like David Axelrod blanketing the airwaves and saying it's time to double down.
If the White House isn't walking away, they're certainly not running with the same kind of bounce in their step. Top Line starts right now.
Hello and welcome to ABCNews.com's Top Line. I'm David Chalian.
And I'm Rick Klein.
Each weekday we're bringing you the very latest political headlines, reporting, insight, analysis, everything you need and want to know about politics.
And because you can't get enough, it's twitter.com/TheNote. Let us know what you think.
Get this Monday week started. What do you got for us in your Top Line?
Vision thing. It's the economy all over again as the White House outlines new middle-class tax breaks and a range of initiatives that try to get the economy moving once again. But the big question as we move into the State of the Union is how do you connect the dots? How does President Obama give an overarching vision for all of these different proposals that are out there, connect it all to health care, connect it to everything else he wants to get done over this next year, and give Democrats something to be happy about again?
Hasn't he been doing the vision thing in the 90-some-odd television interviews he's done over the last year? I'm not sure how he does that. Democratic divide. Yes, there's a huge debate within the Democratic Party that is raging since the loss of the Ted Kennedy seat in the Massachusetts Senate race last week. You've got Ed Rendell on one side saying, make them filibuster on health care, call the Republicans on their bluff. And then you have people like Harold Ford, who's seriously about to jump into the Democratic nomination fight for a Senate seat from New York, saying it's time to start over with health care, do something much smaller, that the country can't afford it, and that the American people don't want it. Evan Bayh, others on the other side of there. This is a debate that begs for President Obama to weigh in on which side wins.
Well, he's the only one that can really answer that. And typical, I think, out of this White House is to not get caught in that kind of box and say it's going to be one or the other and make it ideological. They're going to find a way and try to find a way to really take the fight, but not really make it a we're tacking left or we're tacking center fight. Bo's no-go. The Delaware Attorney General makes it official today. Beau Biden says he will not seek the Senate seat that was held for approximately forever by his father. This is a disappointment to Vice President Biden and, of course, to the entire Democratic establishment. Beau Biden, by far the strongest candidate. We saw, open the window a little bit, the reports yesterday that ended up being erroneous of the vice president saying that his son didn't want to run. It turned out that was true. They still try to get Ted Kaufman in the race, but Ted Kaufman puts out a statement, the interim senator in Delaware. He's not running. That means Democrats have nobody on the ballot to take on Mike Castle.
They basically start from a -2 position for the 2010 cycle. Forgetting Massachusetts for a moment, you have North Dakota with Byron Dorgan resigning a couple weeks ago, and then you have Beau Biden now. I mean, those are two pickups right there with Mike Castle in the race for the Republicans, so they're already down to 57 votes. Bernanke's bumpy ride. Yes, the chairman of the Federal Reserve on Friday probably was heading into the weekend a little worried about his job security, though over the weekend, lots of senators with some White House pressure, not some, with a great deal of White House pressure, started coming out in favor of Bernanke's nomination. In fact, I think some folks like John Kyle of Arizona were seeing flip from being opposed to now being in support. Everyone got scared this was going to roil the markets to some degree. But you take a look at those that are running for re-election in 2010 and how they're voting on Ben Bernanke, and I'll tell you where the country is.
That's the biggest predictor of it, but it's really become a gut check for a lot of Republicans. Unfathomable that whoever President Obama would nominate in his stead would have been the former chairman of the Bush Council and Economic Advisor. So who do you get instead is the question that Republicans have to answer as they're now going to provide the votes.
This guy has this job because of George W. Bush. We are going to begin with that debate that's going on inside the Democratic Party. We're joined by Bob Borosage. He's the co-director of the Campaign for America's Future. Thank you very much for being here.
Pleasure.
I agree with what Rick was saying there at the top, that this White House sort of loathes choosing sides in these kinds of ideological battles, never mind left versus right, but even within their own party of left versus center. But these positions do seem to be irreconcilable, specifically on health care. You have somebody like Ed Rendell saying, let's go, let's make them filibuster. And you have Ford and Evan Bayh saying, it's time to readjust our principles here. It's not just a communications problem. There is an actual policy debate going on. Doesn't the president need to come down on one side or the other?
Yes. In fact, he must. And he must, I think, through the State of the Union, he's got to lay out the direction of the administration and the argument headed into the fall. And I think he's got to take a very strong position now. It's time to show that Democrats are prepared to put down a gauntlet about what is the direction that's best for this country. And I hope he does that. And in that case, health care and getting health care passed is absolutely essential to the economy. It's essential to every family's pocketbook. It's essential to businesses. And I think he ought to push forward.
What's the lesson that you take out of Massachusetts then, and you think the White House should take out of Massachusetts, which Republicans have certainly put the frame on it and saying this was a referendum on health care. The American people don't like it.
Well, Republicans want to make it an ideological election. That was an election about people being very angry and sending a message. And the message was, we're angry and we're scared and we want somebody to be on our side. And they see a Washington where, you know, billions of dollars have been borrowed, no jobs coming back on Main Street, and Wall Street bankers paying themselves million-dollar bonuses. That doesn't look like a good picture. And I think if the president does the right thing on jobs and on the banks, that is, reining in the banks and creating a jobs program, he'll be on the right side of that argument.
What kind of jobs program? Creating jobs how? What can the president do to spur employment in this country? Not adding government jobs, but in the private sector.
Well, I think you've got to have a program that is directed at the kind of problem we have. We have 1 out of 5 Americans unemployed. Business is not going to come back in that circumstance. You've got to have public sector jobs aimed at the most impacted areas. You've got to save the states and localities that are about to lay off policemen and teachers across the country and keep them from being laid off. You've got to go back and do big-time infrastructure and build people, put the construction workers back to work. I don't think there's any choice to that. There's nothing that's going to drive this economy out of the private sector as long as 1 in 5 people are unemployed.
Of course, 2010 looming over all of this, and that's what sent Washington into a tizzy over the last week. You've got Democrats really saying, wow, this is going to be really tough. People like Evan Bayh, who may draw a Republican challenger in Mike Pence, as a result almost directly of Massachusetts. What's wrong with the argument that they're making? They say, look, this says we need to be reaching out to the other side. This says we need to be slowing things down, not be going quite as fast on some of these things.
Well, there's two problems with it. One is Republicans have made it clear they're not cooperating. They're not in the bipartisan game. They are in an obstruction game, and it's working for them. So you're not going to get more cooperation going forward. The second thing is Democrats have the majority. It's time to produce. We're going to be held accountable for it. And you've got to let people know the choice. The fact is we had a set of policies that drove us off the cliff, that created the worst economic conditions since the Great Depression. And we have a Republican Party wants to go back to those. You've got to draw the line and draw the distinction.
So we don't seem to be seeing any kind of ringing endorsement from the majority of Americans for the president's policies right now, this president's policies.
Well, of course. You know, they're sitting there with 1 out of 5 people unemployed. What would you expect? Well, but that's no reason not to. I think the only shot you've got is to make the argument and to make it clear, because you also don't see a ringing endorsement for going back to George Bush. Republican popularity is lower than anything in the polls.
The Campaign for America's Future, one of the leading sort of liberal groups in this town, and very influential in sort of stoking the anti-Bush fire and rhetoric that was the fuel of the Democratic Party at large in 2006 and throughout the nomination fight in 2008. Barack Obama, a hero to many in that movement, and now we are seeing some disenchantment among the liberal base. How dangerous is that? I know you say that he should go and take this fight and continue fighting, but is there a danger that those liberals would not be there for Barack Obama going forward?
Well, if you take Evan Bayh's strategy and you retreat and you let health care go by the board and produce nothing, then you're going to see a lot of people stay home or stay on their hands in the fall. I think if you draw the lines and you give people a choice, that will stoke the base. And you take on the banks and you start pushing for jobs, let Republicans argue about deficits and against regulation, you'll see people come out in the fall.
Okay, so you write the speech. President Obama goes before the nation on Wednesday night. The state of our union is strong. We know all that. What's the takeaway? What's the soundbite that he needs to leave the American people with?
That the soundbite is, look, we've inherited this worst catastrophe since the Great Depression. We are starting to dig our way out of it. We've got to keep going on the course. I'm going to put forward a jobs program to the Congress. I'm going to demand that they pass it over the next 2 months. We're going to keep creating jobs. The thing I'm going to fight for most is jobs for the American people. Secondly, these banks can't get away with what they're doing. I've already put down, called for the Congress to pass a tax so that they pay back everything that they got. We're going to restructure them and break them up so that they are never again too big to fail, and Americans are never forced to bail out the richest people in the country. And I know that the opposition opposes this. I'm ready to have this fight. I'm ready to have it against the special interests, and I'm ready to have it against the other party if they want to pick that fight.
In our final 10 seconds here, is there deflation among the Democratic base right now?
I think people are really worried, sure. I mean, Massachusetts was not just a wake-up call. It was like a mugging in a back alley. And so people are worried, and you can see it across the party. You see it with these various voices going in different ways. But that's when leadership counts. That's when the president has to be the clearest.
Robert Borosage, Campaign for America's Future co-director, thank you very much for being here.
Pleasure.